Hi, everyone. Welcome to another freelance chat. Yay. Hello. We have today a guest I am so excited to have with us, Maggie Patterson of BS Free Business. Welcome, Maggie.
I'm excited to be here, Michelle.
Yay. Maggie, I started following on Threads and I just love every single thing she posts. If you're not following her, be sure to follow her there. You know what? I'll put your handle up here.
Yeah, I'm at BS Free Business on Threads and Instagram.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. But as we get started, and I know people will just be kind of joining us as they can, I would love for Maggie to talk for a couple of minutes about her and her business and all that good stuff.
Okay, so freelancers in the house. I no longer qualify myself as a freelancer, but I am like 19 and a half years into self-employment and was the hardest of the hardcore freelancers for a long time. So you are my people. So I am Maggie Patterson. I have two businesses. I run a content production studio, so I'm still working with clients all the time with me and my team. And we work mainly with B2B tech companies and professional services companies on a number of different types of content, case studies, all that kind of stuff. Of course, and I'm sure we'll touch on this at some point, that has evolved interestingly with the advent of AI. And then I also run BS Free Business, where we work with creatives, consultants, and micro agency owners, and really focusing on like how do you build a business that I call is like strategically small. So if you just want to be a team of one, like how are you going to build a business in a way that you can continue to grow healthily? You're not having to resort to tricks or gimmicks. And if you decide to grow with a team, how are you going to do that in a way that is, in service of not just you, but of your team and your clients? Because so much of what happens, I find with people when they start businesses, or even like more seasoned, they get swept away in this kind of traditional business advice or this kind of weird scammy online advice, and their expectations become really skewed. And I'm very committed as someone who's been my own boss for a long time to being basically a voice of reason to say, hey, no, that's not normal. Please don't do that. Come over here. Let's just do like basic business fundamentals, do them well, and not create businesses that we hate or that we're constantly fantasizing about burning down or that are leading us to burnout on a consistent basis.
Right, and we can never say it enough. That's the thing. That's why I love what you post so much because I'm like, I have said it and said it and said it again. And but people just need to keep hearing it and hopefully, especially now, I think everybody's trying to kind of watch their pennies and watch their budget. And so you've got to be really careful about who you are. If you choose to spend money on a coach or a solution or a platform or anything like that, you have to be really thoughtful and careful and go with somebody that you really know you can trust. And
Yeah.
so we need voices like that. So thank you.
Just here saying all the things out loud that you're all thinking.
Right. I mean, and we can never, like I said, that can never be said enough. So thank you for doing that. And today, I usually give people a chance to introduce themselves. So I should have put that in the chat to tell us what they do. And we are talking all about pricing today. That is our topic. And we will actually have 6 questions today, and we will have time for your questions as well. So if you have questions, I mean, at any point, really, we could probably answer your questions during the chat. But at the end, I will definitely leave a few minutes for questions for Maggie. And I'm sure that Maggie would be happy to answer questions
All
that
day.
come up anytime, right? So, oh, see now here I'm having I'm not typing well today. I'm not very. It should say, "Tell us what you do," not what they do. Anyway, um, so we'll let's see. Let's talk for a minute before we get into the questions. Let's kind of set the stage because I mean, obviously, I have been seeing a lot of talk about it, and I have been feeling it myself that this year is just kind of a I don't know what to call it even this year. It's just weird. It's wonky.
Yeah, I think weird and wonky are a really good way to think. So, we basically had the pandemic, and and then we've had this very kind of strange set of economic circumstances. And I am not going to pretend I'm an economist, but you know, we've had what they're calling, at least in the Western world, a cost of living crisis. Inflation is really high. That's impacting how people are thinking about their spending. We've gone from the job market, where people were like, there was just like, people were commanding super high salaries. They're able to find a job, no problem. It was really that, what they would say is a job seekers market that flipped very, very quickly. So there's been just all these different things. And I think what's happened is, we are technically not in a recession. All the economic indicators are still quite healthy. I saw earlier this week that Goldman Sachs downgraded the odds of a recession, which is great. And I think basically, whether it be, you work with small businesses, you work with big corporate businesses, even like, Fortune 500 companies, there is this kind of trend of cost containment. So they're looking very carefully at every single thing, line item. And should we be spending this or not? Is this a nice to have or not? Or they're trying to find ways to, basically stretch that budget out. And that goes from everything from, it's really interesting. A lot of my clients, sell tech software. So
Mhm.
that they're seeing the same thing. Sales cycles are longer. So that is, basically there's a domino effect of that. So I always say to my clients, like, think of how you feel when you go to the grocery store and the thing you used to buy is $4.99. It's now $7.99. And then you're also feeling stressed about money. So you've got, this rising pricing along with this. So it's in our personal lives, it's in our professional lives. Like, we are just much, much more cost conscious. And that is going to impact people's willingness to invest in services and work with you.
I think you brought up a point, and it just the light bulb went off for me. If you're feeling it in your personal life and you are buying, I work with B2B clients, but you're buying business to business, you're still maybe gonna have that in your head. That
Yes.
psychological piece of it is really something I hadn't considered as a, stumbling block, because I feel like, well, if they're not working with their own budget, and the company's doing fine, then what, like, what's the holdup? Like, what's what's the reluctance? But that's maybe, what it is that they're carrying that over from their personal spending to their professional life. So that's
Yeah. And,
interesting.
when you look at like classic kind of B2B companies, like the stock market impacts that, the debt market impacts that, and like a lot of the debt market has changed. So the willing,
Mhm.
the ease of getting VC money has changed. So a lot
Yeah.
of those things, like, it all compounds into this situation that's not a recession because those economic indicators aren't there, but we're dealing with a lot of things at once that we haven't necessarily seen. So everyone's kind of like, what's happening? I don't know. I'm uncomfortable.
Yeah, I mean, I have not seen any period exactly like this. I've worked through several recessions, but this is just different because it's not, like you said, it's not really a recession.
No.
But it's just something has been off, several things, and, like, I have seen some explanations, but at the end of the day, people are just hurting and people are, it's just not a good thing. So whatever you call it, it's a struggle, and we hope and, I'm hopeful that it's gonna, even out, but, wow, I've seen a lot of people struggling, even people that normally would not be struggling, so that's why I think it's different than normal,
Yeah.
so. So let's see. Let's get into our questions. So we're talking about pricing, and I will share at the end a blog post that Maggie wrote, an excellent blog post. That's kind of what the topic is based on. But let's get our questions going here. Okay, and I will put the question on the screen. What are some pricing truths in 2024? When should freelancers and when should they not consider raising or lowering rates?
Yeah, it's a really complex question. I think the one thing I'm going to say with everything is pricing is layered, it's nuanced, and that's why you can't give out like blanket advice. But there's a few things I think we really should consider. Okay, if you are in a situation right now, like really taking stock and being like, how is my year going? Like, do I have the number of clients I need? Do I not have the clients I need? Do I feel full? Do I have capacity? Like really starting to look at it from that perspective, because one of the things we see a lot of in anyone who's, I mean, it's like, just raise your prices. And it's like this very flippant thing. So, you got to look at actually what's happening in your business to kind of diagnose the problem. So let's say your sales are slow right now. You got to say, okay, what is happening? Am I in a situation where I just don't have enough potential clients coming in the door? Like instead of having 2 a month, I have had like one a quarter. Okay,
Mhm.
so that tells me something very different than the next question, which is maybe you're getting potential clients, but they're all like, oh, you're too expensive. I can't afford it. That's a different situation, right? So,
Mhm.
we got to figure out, is this a marketing problem, a sales problem, or a bit of both? Sometimes it's going to be your market. So, you've got to consider like, if you are not getting enough potential clients, maybe the type of marketing you've been doing needs to shift, evolve. And one thing especially for freelancers, and especially if you do like creative services or something, um, most of us will just wait. We'll wait. We're just waiting for referrals to magically. Are you
Right.
proactively looking for referrals? Are you nurturing the relationships with your referral sources? Are you building relationships with collaborators? We often assume people are just going to remember us. And I'm like, no, like you're like one person they know versus all these other people. So you've got to really be taking the time to nurture that network, to build more relationships. Maybe you've got to look at, hey, if you're a writer, maybe I got to focus on SEO focused writing for my own website to do those blog posts because I know
Right.
how to do SEO. So really looking for ways to expand how you're marketing so your total potential lead sources is wider. And then on the flip side of, if you're getting clients, they're all like, oh, you're too expensive. Well, are you marketing to the right people? Like, is your market, does it even have the capacity for the pricing?
Mhm.
Um, are people coming to you who aren't the right people? Do they not understand the value? Sometimes you're going to have to shift markets. You're going to have to adjust who you're trying to sell to.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's going to be a matter of maybe, and this is what I do a lot with clients, is maybe your proposals, if you write proposals,
Mhm.
really need to articulate the value better. You need to even sometimes just changing up little things like a pricing table or breaking it into a different payment plan. All of those strategic things can really impact if you're getting to yes and no. So I think really looking at like, how many leads am I getting in? And
Mhm.
like, am I closing those leads? Or like, what is my, kind of win-loss rate? I think those are really important metrics to look at so that you feel like you have some basis versus like, I don't know, I just feel like it's just like not like it was last year.
Yeah.
And
Right? If we had some data, if we gathered some data and we could look at it. I mean, I guess I do go a lot by feel, like, it doesn't feel like, but I mean, I think there is something to that because I track every like lead on a sheet and I can see
yeah,
like, who referred or where did it come from? Did it come from social? Did it come from a contributed article that someone saw that I wrote or like whatever it is? And then did it work out? Did we have a conversation? Did I send a proposal? What was sometimes they just ghost you, so you don't really know, like, you
yeah.
assume it was probably too much, but, I mean, maybe you don't know. So it's always good to know, like, when you're going through that negotiation too, are they talking to other people, and what's their time frame? And I try to kind of hopefully let them know that, I've put time and effort, so they should at least, like, close the loop, but sometimes, we just don't always get that
Yeah, and
feedback.
one thing I mean, I've experienced this, I know my peers have experienced this, my clients have experienced this, is if you are like losing every single proposal, let's say, or your
Mhm,
really large thing is maybe you're sending proposals to people that you should have just said, you know what, this isn't going to be a great fit. Like doing a better job of screening the people that even get into those, why are you writing a proposal for someone who like it's going to be a no, so maybe don't write that proposal, maybe don't even take the sales call with them if it's not going to be right. So I think being more intentional about those things, and also recognizing with your marketing it probably needs to shift and evolve. And one thing I will just point out is I often see people And this is a really interesting one, especially if you are focused on working with more corporate clients, taking advice on how to market from people who are selling to other entrepreneurs. This is one of my biggest pet peeves. So they will be like, well, you need to be all over these social media platforms, or you need to do a webinar. And it's like, if you're selling to the VP of marketing at a mid-size company, they don't have time for these things. So understanding your client, target client, and like where can you find them and connect with them in a much more strategic way versus being like, well, XYZ coach on Instagram said I should do this. And it's like, they don't know anything about selling to corporate clients. So please don't take their advice.
No, it's very different. I mean, and I work with B2B and I talk about it because I don't think people understand that it is different. It's different when you're working with, your own money versus, somebody else's money. And like, there are budgets and they can sometimes find money that they didn't have in their budget or, whatever. So I think, it is very different. I mean, I'd say it's very different. I prefer working with B2B clients. I've worked with both, and I just feel like, it's just there's challenges either way. But I mean, yeah, I think right now would be a really hard time to be getting consumers or entrepreneurs to cough up more money when they're probably struggling, like a lot of people are. So I don't know. It's tough. It's tough out there. Yeah, and there was something else you said that kind of made me think about something. The wording in the proposal, that's a really good point because I feel like sometimes maybe it is better to put it into like to break it into chunks or payments or like some kind of, maybe the whole amount itself is just too much
It's just a
to
little trick. I never show the total amount.
really.
Nope.
Okay. What about
Because
retainers?
retainers is a little different, but like a lot of people, what they'll do is they'll be like, especially if you use a pricing proposal software or anything like that, is it'll be like 1 year, 12 times $5,000 a month. And so they're seeing $60,000 instead of $5,000. Pricing psychology starts to sit in and they're approaching that differently. If you have phases of the project breaking into phases so they can see, and it's not to be like, you're not a McDonald's menu to be like the fries were this and there's, but for
Yeah.
them to see smaller numbers to feel more comfortable when you start getting into the total life of this contract is $100,000 or whatever, people are like, oh my God. Like it's just, we start to deal with these bigger numbers and people's lack of tolerance for those, it diminishes,
Yeah. Yeah, that
even if
makes
it's not their own money.
right. Well, I do retainers, but I always just put the monthly
Yes.
rate. That's how I do it. But with projects, I think that is a good idea because I was actually talking to somebody about doing a project and they were saying, well, think of it like this is their budget, but this doesn't have to be broken down into monthly. It could be just, maybe it's, a month on this piece and then a month on that piece or whatever. So it just becomes more palatable for
Yes.
everyone to get their head around that. Because if you look at it that way, it's much less, crazy than thinking, oh, well, they have $12,000, which is $1,000 a month, which means we can't do anything because it's not enough. It's like, no. If we broke it into 3 chunks of $4,000, that might be okay. We could do these 2 things, and then we could do this thing, and then so just do it that way, and just don't spread it over a year, maybe something like that.
Yeah.
So
The other thing with proposals is just really understanding that it is a sales tool. It is a sales document. A lot of times, I will review proposals. This is my proposal template I'm using. I'm like, yeah, you're missing this. And it's not that people are doing it wrong. It's that they're not thinking about if I'm the VP of marketing and I need to take this to the CMO,
right.
it's got to stand alone. So it's got to really wrap everything how we're going to work. You want them to be envisioning how you're going to work together and why you're the perfect choice.
Yeah, well, that makes me write a note down.
Yeah, I give a lot of proposal insecurity to people and I don't mean to, but it's like that is the one thing I know for sure. Like I always get compliments on our proposals. Like, this is the best proposal we've ever seen. And it's not that I have any magic superpower. It's that I figured this out over a very long period of time of like, I was like, oh, yeah, I could add that. Oh, well, what
Yeah.
can I do here? Oh, interesting. So there's been a lot of trial and error in this.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to check out your examples or your thoughts on that because I've had the same, I've been in business for so long. I've had the same, kind of format for things, and I definitely change things around. But I'm just now having like an attorney review my consulting agreement and just kind of refresh it and make sure it covers me completely. And just I've been, when you've been doing it a long time, sometimes you forget like you have to look at your own business practices and documents and make sure everything's kind of updated to where you're at today because it's definitely different than when I started 20 some years ago. So
For sure.
so the second question is what are some things freelancers can do if their sales are slow right now? And of course this is the question of the year, right? I mean it's oh golly.
Yeah. So, I mean, the number one thing is like once you kind of diagnose that problem is just becoming more proactive. And it's not that people are not doing anything, but it's like, do you need another type of marketing? If you currently serve this market and it's not doing well financially, like what are all the other markets around, like, kind of the adjacent markets where you have, transferable skills and experience? Sometimes you're going to have to get creative. Um, Maybe you need to be working more on your messaging. Like there's a lot of different potential things, but understanding at kind of the top line is, am I getting a message that I'm too expensive? So like, okay, I need to, shift my market. I need to shift how I'm positioning myself. I need to be
Mhm.
reaching different people. Or, is it a matter of I don't have enough leads and I really and truly need to be focusing on my marketing and really going back to the basics. Because I will say this, like being proactive for a lot of people when it comes to this stuff feels uncomfortable, but you want your business to succeed, and a lot of the marketing that makes people feel most uncomfortable is asking for referrals, building relationships. It is going to be the most effective and most direct way to do it, and it's like 99% less work than all other forms of marketing. Like just posting on social media, like yeah, it can work to get you clients, but it's we're going to acquire so much more time and effort on your part than just sending an email and reconnecting with a past client and like having a conversation with them.
Yeah. Well, I think, a lot of us I've never like done any paid advertising for my
Yeah.
business. It's always been, word of mouth and
Yeah.
then, yes, doing like blogging and writing contributed articles and posting on social. And some of those things do work, but it's like, it's, you get into a mode where you're just doing all of it like all the time. And I think sometimes people make the mistake of, oh, well, I'm busy. I don't have time. I'm going to pull back. And then you get into a period where it's slow and you're like, "Ugh, gosh, I wish I would have been doing this." And then it's too late because it's like, well, the sales cycle is what the sales cycle is or whatever. So the time to be doing it is before or I mean, constantly, I think, but, I don't know.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. If you work, let's say 48 weeks a year, can you give up 30 minutes to an hour? Like, yeah, you probably should, just to be like fostering relationships, building relationships, checking in with referrals and collaborators, like spending a little bit of time on that stuff ongoing makes it much less stressful for future you.
Yeah. Future you. That's it. There you go. That's it.
Yeah, because sometimes we don't think about future us, and then future like in when we get to that timeline, we're like, oh yeah, no, I should have been doing that.
Yeah. No, I'm writing that down too because I need to put it on a big note and put it up here in the
Yeah, don't my counterpart in my agency always says, "Don't make problems for future you." Like, I'm like, "Yeah, future me does not want this problem."
Right. I was thinking that in the kitchen last night. I'm like, if I don't clean this now, I'm gonna have to clean it later.
Yeah,
So it's like
exactly.
it's better to just get in there and get it done, right? So I mean,
Yeah.
that's a very good attitude to adopt for some of these things. So all right. So let's look at our next question. All right. How can reviewing your pricing and looking at the trends in your business help you determine pricing that works right now?
Yeah, so I think a lot of what people do with pricing is kind of this gut feeling pricing, and they will literally just kind of pick it. Oh, it's going to be this. And it's like, well, what is that based on? And I think what we have to do is recognize what is actually happening in our business. So maybe this is not the time to 5x your magical pricing and just hope for the best, is to be really, really thoughtful. So, what is the current price of your services? How many have you sold in the last 12 months? What are you closing? Understanding what is your most popular, what is your least popular, like really, again, going back to this baseline of actually what's happening. Because if you don't understand that and you want to raise your prices, you're really going to get into a situation where it's not going to be tethered to reality. Like if you were having the worst time selling one specific service, maybe you need to retool that service. Maybe you need to take something out. Maybe you need to position it differently. Like there's all these levers you can pull, but if you don't understand it's the least popular service and then just increase the price randomly, you're creating a more friction there. So you need
Yeah.
to figure that out. And then the other part is like being really thoughtful about the actual numbers. And I actually have a pricing calculator, which is on my website, which we can link up to. But the one thing you want to think about is, okay, instead of just being like, I feel like it's $2,000, like, what is it, how much time is involved? What tools are required, understanding all the inputs. And one thing I've pointed out a lot in the last year is software prices on everything has gone up. Like 2023 and 2024, like almost every single tool I have is increased. Canva just announced a price increase. So if you're not factoring that into your pricing, what's happening? If your baseline rate is, I'm just going to use $10 an hour. No one should ever have a $10 an hour rate. But if it's $10 an hour and your expenses are 4 of that, you're basically giving yourself a paid demotion. So you need to be figuring out what those actual numbers are and using those to figure out like, okay, this is like my baseline hourly rate. These are my expenses and my costs. And then this is kind of what my packages or my projects are going to look like. Because at the end of the day, that inaccurate pricing will really and truly eat up your profit. And then that impacts your ability to pay yourself. And that to me, like, I hate seeing that.
Yes, I'm putting it in here. Inaccurate pricing can eat up your profit. There you go. Tip of the day. But I for a while, there was all this advice to raise your rates, raise your rates, raise your rates. And there was some point, even going into this year, I felt like there was kind of like a wave of like, everything's going to be cool in 2024. I was doing some research yesterday and a headline came up from December of 2023 about how normal the economy was going to be in 2024. And I'm like,
wrong.
They missed the mark on that one, didn't they? So yeah, I mean, I just, that advice right now, I feel like, I mean, I think I will share the blog post. And when I was reading, I was like, yes, if you are swamped with business, and I saw somebody in financial services was saying it, they'd had their best month ever in July or something, but that's the only person I've really seen, the only people that I've seen talking about how well they're doing are people that are working in financial service writing. So I'm like, okay, well.
And there's a lot of people who, depending on what industry or vertical they're working in, like there's much more stability there. And I mean, I definitely have some clients like they're having really, really good years. At the same time, they are in that situation. And I think this is one that's like, it's a successful business problem, if you will. Like if you're overloaded, that also is starting to tell me something about your pricing. Like maybe you're too cheap. So if you, let's say you work with retainer clients and like your max is like 6, but you've got enough demand, like maybe you could charge a little more and have fewer clients and like buy back, essentially, get back some of your time. I think it's always better to have a few less clients and make the same amount of money, because it's less stress, it's less administration, it's less, unbillable time. Whereas we trick ourselves into thinking, well, more clients must be better. And it's like, if it's more clients at a rate that is lower,
Yeah.
You know, if you get yes on this, I will stand by this. If you're getting yes at almost every single proposal you send, you need to raise your price because it
Yeah.
works in there.
Yeah, I mean, a few years ago, people were telling me I needed to do that, and the more I heard it, the more I was like, "You know what? I really need to do it," because I felt like, "Oh, well, this is gonna be an advantage and, that my pricing seems more reasonable than my competitors or whatever," and then the other thing I started doing was posting it on my site. I redid my site and started putting it up there. So and then I stopped getting a lot of what I would call tire kicker calls, and there's nothing wrong with that, and I don't mean to, belittle it in any way, but it's just like sometimes it's just not a fit because, again, if you are, promoting your own thing, a book or some cause or whatever, you probably don't have the same amount to spend as a bigger company. Even and I work with what I would call smaller companies, like 500 employees, but that's different than a single, person spending their own money. So, yeah, it's something and we were talking about before we started about how, I mean, even all these years in, I still, struggle sometimes. It's like, if they say yes, I should have charged more. If they say no, I should have charged less. So it's this trap that we get in as freelancers or working for ourselves in our head. I think that it's, we can just drive ourselves crazy,
And
literally.
that's why,
So,
honestly, Michelle, I feel like if you take the time to do the math of like, this needs to be my baseline hourly rate, these are the expenses involved. Like when I did PR, I had a very expensive PR database that I was paying for as a solopreneur. Like it was a big line item in my budget. It was probably the most expensive thing I had. So
yeah,
I started figuring out like, okay, this is basically the carrying cost of this is X across X, percentage wise for clients. Like, and I started factoring that into what my budget is for clients were going to be because I was like, I would not have this if this was not for you. And yes, it's a cost of doing business, but I also like need to build my pricing in a way that absorbs the cost so my pricing is still profitable.
right. Yeah, I don't that's something we've talked about a lot over the years on the chat is just that you're running a business and you have business expenses and you're paying for them. You're probably, maybe you're paying for your health insurance, maybe you're paying for your, like your office space, maybe whatever it is. I mean, we all have expenses and I think a lot of us downplay or don't really itemize or even, just we don't know. We don't even know what we're spending on that
Well,
stuff
I
sometimes.
remember like years ago. So I came out of an agency environment. So for me, billing $100 an hour was like totally like I was a steal. I was a steal to my former clients, right? And
Right.
I had no problem getting booked. But what I started to realize over time is I never like I didn't raise my rates for 8 years. This is why I talk about pricing so much,
Yeah.
because over time things were getting more expensive, but I was and my skills were increasing, but I wasn't raising that price because in my brain, $100 an hour is a lot. But
Right.
if you looked at me in a comparable role in corporate with my skills and experience, like maybe I wouldn't be being paid $100 an hour, but I would have a very healthy salary with a lot of benefits. So,
Right. Yeah,
if you ever
exactly.
having a wobble on pricing, go look at how much your role would be paid in corporate. It'll make you start feeling better.
Um, I wanna go back to for a second about the fewer clients. Now,
Yeah.
I like to have enough that it's spread out. So if I lost one, it
Yes.
wouldn't be like because I knew a guy once who had, like, 2 clients that were, like, maybe 5,000 a month each. He lost one, and then he lost the other one, and he was the sole like, the primary breadwinner for his family, and he had kids and a wife, and. So it was an issue, right? It was a big so I ever since I saw that happen, I was like, "Ooh, we gotta make sure we spread it out, if you can," but that doesn't mean having, 20 clients or whatever. I mean, it might mean 5 or 7 but it doesn't have to be like, it depends, like, on how your business works, but yeah, I don't know that, um it makes me nervous when I don't have enough, but there's kind of a sweet spot in there.
There is absolutely a sweet spot. And like when you have a client like that, it's an anchor client and it's a
Mhm,
wonderful thing until it's
mhm,
not a wonderful thing.
mhm.
Like, it's an anchor that's gonna drag you down at some point when,
Right.
acquired or, can you afford to lose, 50% of your revenue or 75 like, you have to look at kind of the percentages of things and ensure that you're managing that risk to some degree.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what makes me nervous, when you lose one and you think, "Ooh, I was gonna add on to what I had, and now I"
Yeah.
Alright, let's get this next question up here. Q4, whether you price by the hour or the project, how can you determine a baseline hourly rate? That's a good follow-on question, what we were just talking about.
So there's a couple things. So to get to, and this is why there's a calculator, because I am not a math person, I'm a words person. But here's the thing, instead of being like just jumping to the I'm going to price this, I think it's this, is having a baseline hourly rate, whether you charge by the hour or don't charge by the hour. I don't care. You need a baseline hourly rate that is incorporating a more than livable wage that's, including all the things you need to have a business and to meet your goals. So to kind of reverse engineer that is, how much are you going to work? How many weeks a year are you going to work? Understanding like all the inputs, and you might get to something to be like, well, that's totally unrealistic, but at least you kind of get a basis of reality versus, oh, I think $75 is good. Like, we don't want to just arrive at numbers because they're good. We want to engineer them because so many freelancers, especially, are chronically underpaid because they do not do the math of this. So, understanding like how much you want to work, understanding all those inputs makes a difference to get to what that baseline hourly rate is. And I will also tell you that hourly rate, and I have this fight with agency owners every so often, is that hourly rate needs to compensate for the fact that you do not get all the benefits of being an employee. So if they're like, well, I want to pay a contractor $40 an hour because that's what it will work out as an employee. No, you need to be charging 80 for that. And they need to be dealing with that. So do not let people lowball you, because that's the cost of it, what an employee would be if they averaged out their hourly.
Mhm.
They also get paid vacation, they get benefits, they get all those things. You are incurring the risk, therefore your rate is going to be higher.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's something that, some people just don't understand, and we have to be, more transparent and talk about it more so that people understand. I hope that people are starting to understand. I would love this wasn't on my list of questions, but I would love to hear what you think about Upwork. So
So Upwork is really interesting, right? Because I work with a lot of people who've had a lot of success on it. But they are very strategic in what they do. Um, it is for a lot of people a race to the bottom, and
Right.
and it can be a major time suck. And I think the thing for me is, I always like, do I think it's, hey, you've got some space to fill, you're going to pick up a gig, great. Do you want that to be the only way you're finding clients? And
Right.
because a lot of them are price shopping, not all of them, but some of them, and you don't want to be reliant on that.
No.
The other thing that's super interesting, and we just encountered it this past year, is there is this other side of Upwork that's Upwork Enterprise,
Oh.
um, which is super interesting because it is meant for companies like big companies that have complex contracting vehicles so they can hire easily. So if you ever have a potential client who wants to work with you through Upwork Enterprise, I would honestly, it's been a really good experience for us because they put the money in escrow and like it gets dispersed based on timelines. It was really easy to set up. So I was actually like, I was like, oh, but I was like, okay, we're going to try this because it's relatively low risk. If we gets us paid faster and we don't have
Mhm.
to do this master service agreement business, that would be fine.
Mhm.
So don't be scared of Upwork Enterprise.
Yeah, I haven't seen much about that. I know that they've had a massive, ad campaign all year, and it just drives me crazy because I do think, it is kind of, I don't know, just it's dangerous to be putting all your eggs in that basket. I think you're right
Yes.
that if people wanna try it out or whatever, that's fine, but don't be basing your entire, like, strategy to bring in new business on Upwork because that's gonna just, be a losing battle, I think, so.
Yeah. But if you're in a little bit of a leaner season and you need to fill in some gaps, I think that it's definitely worth looking at and understanding that like probably 90% of them are going to be priced way too low and be price shopping. But there are, some gems get turned up there.
Yeah. Well, I just was curious because I thought I'm just gonna throw that in because I think about it, and every time I it comes up and people ask me what I think about it, I'm always like,
Yeah. I
"Nope."
would not like I personally would not want to rely on it.
The race to the bottom thing is a thing that, pops into my head because I used to be on it and use it, but then I just saw everybody wanted first of all, they wanted things that I didn't really think were necessarily, like, good things to be wanting. They'd be the kinda client who'd say, "Just get me into Forbes," I just don't wanna be in Forbes, and everybody wanted to be in Forbes or TechCrunch or whatever, and I'm like, "Well, that's not really how it works," like, you can put that on the list, but, like, you can also just go over and pay Forbes because 'cause they'll publish anyone who'll pay them. So, like, I'm like, "Okay." But then this just the rates, was just the lowest, bidder, and I'm
Yeah.
like, "No, that's not really good." So, anyway, let's put up our next question, which kind of is what we just talked about a little bit about why should you review your business expenses as part of adjusting your pricing? And you mentioned just a few minutes ago about how prices of everything are going up, but let's dig into that a little bit more.
So one of the things that we tend to treat in a little bit of at least a lot of people I've worked with and myself. What happens is we kind of treat our financials over here and our pricing over here. And I'm like, no, no, that's all the same thing. So, understanding for the business, what is the business? What are the business's expenses? Having a budget we're managing to, understanding how that all impacts how you need to price things and your ability to pay yourself. So once you start to see all those things connected together, you start making much more strategic decisions about your pricing, um, even about what clients you're going to take on. Because at the end of the day, like I want everyone to be paid and be paid well and like live a life that's comfortable, and not just in this. I want it to be something that's sustainable, not just kind of like scraping by. So understanding that, hey, Canva just did this X number of percent price increase and
Mhm.
all my expenses have gone up 30% in the last year. That does mean there's kind of just a cost of living, cost of running business adjustment that for new clients coming in, like maybe you're not 2xing, 5xing your prices, but you need to like creep it up to compensate for that instead of being past Maggie who, just never raised her rates for 8 years. This is a cautionary tale. Don't do this because you're degrading your bottom line and you are the one at the end of the day that suffers. No one else is looking out for you.
Right. Yeah. No, like I said, I was in that too, where I was just, thought, oh, this sounds like, plenty, and I don't, think I should be raising it. And then, yeah, I just, based on things that were happening in my work world, I was like, yeah, you know what? I think these are signs that it's probably time. And it's always nerve wracking to communicate like price increases too. And that's a whole nother, psychological type of, thing that you have to figure out like, oh, what's the right time and how should I say it? And, like, I think most clients do understand. I mean, obviously, back to the beginning where we were talking about how everybody's, the price of everything is going up in your personal life and in your work life. So it's kind of like it makes sense. But then again, I don't think you want to be like nickel and diming or like constantly like every 6 months or like whatever, So when I do an increase, I try to make it like, you know, enough that I'm not gonna have to come back again and do it in, a few months later or whatever. I don't like to do that to clients because I think I know how that would make me feel, and I wouldn't go for that, so
Yeah, and here's the thing with the price increase is, I often with the clients I have like in my masterminds and I work with 101, price increases are something that they're dealing with. And there's always like a lot of like, I'm like holding their hand, I'm like, we can do, let's go. And the only times I have seen a price increase go badly, which has been like, I can think of one offhand, it's because there wasn't enough, the timing wasn't right, or the like amount of notice. You can't just be like October 1st on the invoice, be like, yo, your prices have increased. They have a budget too. They have processes as well. So, timing it correctly when things are going well to ask for the price increase, making sure there's adequate notice. I have been on the receiving end with contractors of like some very aggressive price increases that with enough notice and enough discussion I would be comfortable with. I've also been on the receiving end of ones where I'm like, what?
Right.
No, no, like please go listen to my podcast. That's not how this works. You can't do that. Like,
Yeah. No, that's what I think is scary is when, you all of a sudden decide you're gonna do it and then you just, lay it on them. It's like there's no notice or anything. It's like, no, like, wow, okay. Like that would be a reason maybe, to get rid of you entirely if you're not careful about how you do it. So I just think again, in the time that we are living in right now, I think you have to, certainly just it depends on your circumstances, but be careful. Like, don't go nuts with it. I think maybe I don't know.
also, I think be confident in it. Like, I feel like the
Mhm.
inclination is to kind of apologize or to try to justify it. A
Right.
price increase is a factual thing. Like, do, do you think that software companies are worried, like lying around being like, well, watermelon's a lot, so I better like they're not having that as simple as like, hey, starting this date, my prices are going up to this. If you have any questions, let's discuss it. I want to give you adequate notice as a valued client. That's it. Don't apologize for it because with clients, they're, I'm not going to say difficult, but maybe less than ideal. Like they're going to smell that on you. And
Right.
then you're like, do you want to be playing let's make a deal with your client? No, absolutely not.
No, we don't want to play let's make a deal.
Yeah, no, I'm pricing from my point of view with a client is not a negotiation. Like I'm willing to negotiate on a lot of things, but I'm not negotiating on the price.
Well, I mean, here's something though that I have learned through the chat is just that like if they do have a budget, first of all, they should communicate that and you can
Yes.
ask them if they don't communicate it. But if they come back to you and they are kind of like balking at the price, you can always like maybe negotiate the scope of work. Maybe,
Yes. Yeah.
or we can start with these things and do these things later, or we can add this in or whatever it is. So I think there are ways, creative ways besides lowering your rate or your price or whatever, but just, I try to work with them and I'd like to know what you think about this. Should you make that clear up front that you're negotiable, that you're flexible, or should you just put it out there and say this is it?
When it comes to negotiating scope of work, I feel like absolutely there should be there, and especially too if it's a bigger project or it's a like some back and forth there to get it to the place where you both want it is great. And I
Mhm.
feel like if you're negotiating the actual scope, wonderful. But if you were coming to me and saying like, can you bring it down 30%? I'd be like, no. And I always like end my proposals with a next steps section that's like, hey, review this proposal in detail. If you have a questions or we need to have a conversation, like I make it very clear I'm open to the conversation and like we can adjust scope, but only so much. Because if I am recommending, my favorite is when they come back and they're like, okay, I need to bring down the budget, but I'm going to take out the most essential part of the project like messaging because I think it's not important. Oh, we've already got that. That's not the negotiation I'm doing. So it's like, what are the things that are like the nice to haves and what are the must haves and knowing where you're willing to move on that.
Okay. I have a friend who will not deliver a proposal without a phone call to go with it. Like they go over it on the phone. Like they set up a call and they go over it on Zoom or phone call or whatever. So, yeah, I've wondered about that too because I think it's far too easy to send it over and then they take a look and see the number. Maybe they don't even read the rest of it and they're like, "Nope, too much," or whatever. Not nope. And then they just
Yeah.
like sometimes they don't even reply. They don't even respond. So,
That's their
um,
extroverted heart doing a call. I have a number of clients who present them with in a loom. Like they'll
okay.
walk them through the proposal with a
Mhm.
video, which I think is great because they can kind of, they can hear there's nuances, they can hear your tone of voice. Like it's a much more kind of warmer, personal thing without necessarily having to have another call on the calendar.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's just yeah, I never know the exact right way. It is for me, it is a lot of gut, but I know that not using your gut on determining your rate and things is
Well,
that's
and you
probably not a good idea.
like, honestly, the gut needs to be there, but it can't be pure gut.
Right. Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But you do get when you've been doing it a while, I think you do get a sense. When you're newer, it's much more like I think you do need to follow advice and figure out like whose advice you're going to follow and then, use that because it could be a little nerve-wracking and you can definitely make missteps if you don't know what you're doing. So,
Absolutely.
but you learn. We all learn from our
We sure
mistakes
do.
too. So this is our last question, and then we will ask if anyone has questions for you that we haven't talked about. So, how transparent should you be when sharing pricing with potential clients?
I am team be very transparent. And there's a bit of a nuance to that. So if you offer like pre-packet, like you have packages or something that has a relatively fixed rate, and you work with like other entrepreneurs or end consumers, you absolutely need to be transparent. I feel like when you are stuff that's a little, like I would say it's like a squishy scope, I tend to use with corporate clients like a start at, and we will have a question of a back and forth. Like if let's say I get a referral and then they're like, oh, I want to do this case study project. I'm like, okay, great. Before I'm booking that consultation call, I will literally say, so we're on the same page, and I'm respecting your time. So you're aware, case studies projects start at XYZ. Like, I want them to know before they get on the call. That way, if like price XYZ is nowhere near, like it's $5,000 and they thought it was gonna be 500, we're not
Mhm,
wasting each other's time.
mhm,
Not writing a proposal for that's gonna be a no. Time is valuable and I'm not getting it back. So um and also just being like, for me, it's a thing of respect. Like, I don't
mhm.
need to tell you every last little bit about the price, but we need to know if we're in the same, state on this. Like, are we anywhere near each other, or am I in
Right.
New York and you're in California? Like, that's not going to work.
Mhm. Yeah. It's interesting because I see this I just saw it on Threads again the other day. I see it over and over again where people go back and forth about whether or not to put your prices on your website. Some people are just adamantly, vehemently opposed to it, and other people are, proponents of it. And I mean, I didn't do it for years and years and years. And then when I redid my website, I decided I would do it and just see how it went because I thought, well, I can always take it down if, it doesn't. But honestly, like I said, I don't think that it's made a huge like difference other than the fact that I think sometimes people see it and might be like, okay, this isn't really going to be a fit for me financially. So, that's fine. So I'd rather know that, again, to your point, you don't want to waste people's time and vice versa. So,
And I mean, do you want to start? I think there's two kind of interesting things in this. Is do you want to start a relationship with a potential client with this kind of like, I'm not going to tell you. It's a mystery. Like, I don't want to have client relationships where I'm shrouding anything in like the veil of silence. So I'm like, oh, I can't tell you until we have a call and I handle your objections. And then the other part of this is when you see those conversations, so much of it comes not from what's happening in the B2B world. It's coming from that online business bubble where it's coaches who do this, or
mhm,
programs or whatever, where they are gating the price. So you will have to get on the phone so they can coach you through your objections, and they can manipulate you with their predatory marketing and sales practices. And so a lot of this conversation comes from that because people are sick and tired of it. Like, if I'm looking to work with someone and they have a program and I have to get on a call to find out the price, that's an absolute no for me. Absolute no.
yeah. Sometime you'll come back and talk to me about predatory practices. I just wrote that
Oh,
down.
yeah, I got a whole podcast on that stuff.
Okay. What was I gonna say? Oh, well, no, I saw somebody again on Threads the other day is talking about how they were looked at something they needed a service. They were looking at a service provider site and there was no pricing listed, so they just took off and went, somewhere else. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I feel like it's a good idea that people wanna know, especially, now, because it just again, it does save some time at least. If that's the only factor involved is pricing, I mean, I don't know. That's another question, I guess, but
Yeah, and I mean, starts at prices, ranges, those are all good things. And I mean, at the end of the day, whether you're the best marketer on the planet or not, you absolutely do not need to be in a situation to coach anyone through the objections. You're dealing with other humans who are smart and savvy, and like just be respectful enough, because nothing is going to destroy trust faster than you playing games around that stuff.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, when I talk pricing or, I think even on my site, it probably says, this is, like this is an idea of the pricing. Of
Yeah.
course, I mean, every client, every situation is different. I'm never going to just be like, this is the rate for every single thing, every
Yes.
single, I always end up doing, a custom proposal for clients, so
Yeah, and that's, I mean, that's why I'm a fan at starts at, because I need more information to know, is this X or Y?
right. Yeah. So I just I think it's interesting though, because I think a lot of people are really afraid of putting the pricing up there. And I'm like, well, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it's just after a while you're like, well, here it is. And like I'm just gonna deal with
But it's
the
interesting to me. If you're afraid to put the price on your website, what
Mhm.
do you think is going to change when you get on a call and have to tell the client the potential price or put it in a proposal? Like if you're not confident up here with it,
Yeah.
like, and I mean, I do think there's situations where I would 100% be able to make the case to say, like, it doesn't make sense for you to have this price, the pricing there. Like, there's, again, there's always nuances to this. But
Right.
if you're not confident to put it on your website, like, are you going to be any more confident when you're looking them in the eyes on Zoom? Are you going to be any more confident when you have to send the proposal? Like, I don't think so.
No. No, I yeah, I think there's just a fear factor involved with it, and, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess you don't wanna scare people away before you've talked to them, but I don't know. I just
Maybe it's just me. I'm not convinced that I'm like charming enough to win them over with my amazing personality. Like, I want people to get on because they're like genuinely interested, not because I have to convince them to work with me, please.
right. Yeah. Well, again, and I think, you and I are probably at a different stage than a lot of
Yeah.
people, and it does take, like, if people don't feel comfortable, sharing, I guess that's fine, but at some point, it's gonna come up, and you're gonna have to talk about it, and yeah, so that's why the person that was working with me on my site, it was really convincing me to do it, and I'm not really sorry I did it, and, yeah, so it's there, and that's it. So I don't know. Um, I'm gonna share first of all, thank you for being here. We're down to our last couple of minutes. If people have questions, I would love to, have them ask. I'm trying to find the blog post, that we base this on because there's a lot of great stuff in there too, and, I will find it, and, let's see. Any other thoughts as we close out here?
I think Angela actually has a question in the chat.
Oh, here we go. For freelancers who've been doing this for a while, how do you know when to stop raising prices? Or do they still kind of keep going up to balance with inflation and cost of living? That is a good question.
Yeah, so I think if you've been doing this a while and you feel like you're kind of at the, let's say, like the top end of what your market would be, is there's always going to have to be some upward movement. You're just probably not going to do as big jumps as you did before. You're like, okay, it's like 10% or whatever. But I think you do need to be keeping pace with the cost of living, because at the end of the day, your clients, it's very rare that a client's, I would say extraordinary, that a client's going to come to you and be like, I think we should raise the budget 10. They're just not going to do that, right? So I think having an idea of like, I know my costs are going up a little bit. And then I think what's really becomes interesting, just as a side note on this, is as you become more seasoned, is starting to look at pricing isn't the only strategy you're maneuvering to make more money. Like maybe you work in a different market, you deliver things differently, you do different types of projects that require less effort. Like you've got lots of different ways to kind of, there's, I call it the time money trap. You've got little different levers to deal with there. And so pricing, you know, yes, you need it to keep pace, but there becomes other ways you can continue to grow that income.
Yeah, that's a good, I like that question because that's kind, I think that was kind of why I was reluctant, because I had been doing it for so long, and I thought, well, some say raise it $10 every year, $10 an hour or whatever, and I'm like, the getting away from the hourly rate thing, I think too was a big piece
Yeah.
for me. Was like, I'm not really going to do that if I can avoid it. I can have that in my head and I know what it is, but it's really going to be more projects or retainers. And then I don't have to really worry about, this, I only spent 3 hours doing this thing. How do I value bill this client? Because, if somebody else did it, it would take them 10 hours, so
Yeah.
it's kind of that's another thing, another dance that I do in my head. I'm like, wait a second. So
I
yeah.
also love that Carmen said there's flexibility in pricing based on the client's charm factor. 100%. How excited am I to work with this client? Like, I'm not going
Yeah.
to say, or the client has red flags, or like, I don't really
Yeah.
like this technology. Like that, absolutely, there is a variance that I can play with there, and I recommend you play with it. Sometimes like there needs to be a pain in the butt upcharge. Just because this type of project always
Mhm.
has an overrun, or like, there's going to be stuff that you cannot account for. And that needs to go in there too.
Yeah, and sometimes I think, psychologically we're like, well, I'm not sure if I really want to work with this client, but I'm going to mark the rate. And if they say yes, then, like I'll do it.
That's what I call my FU price. Like, I'm like, I would be really thrilled to do this project for this price. I'm
Right.
glad if it doesn't happen. And every so often it does. And I'm like, I'm so glad I charged that much.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's like, well, I'm going to put this either way, whatever, however it works out is fine, but I'm definitely going to mark it up a little bit because I'm just, but yeah, now we're giving away our secrets.
Well, I would just say one last kind of secret in the pricing world, and I talk about this like wherever I can, is when you're thinking about your pricing, and you mentioned that I don't want to nickel and dime on the pricing. You also don't want to have to nickel and dime in the scope. And we've all been there where it's like they've asked for one more thing and you're like, I don't want to do this. When you price your stuff, build in a generosity margin so that like maybe that's 10% or whatever. Like there needs to be margin for you to do those little extra things for the client that you don't want to have to go back to. And it's not a matter of like they're like greatly exceeding the scope, but I don't want to be like, oh, you wanted like a second version of that case study that was going to take 30 minutes. I don't want to have that conversation. So I would rather just have it in there to be like, I can have some discretionary, discretion on the scope and not feel squeezed on the budget.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I am very glad that we did this today. And I want to thank you for being here. And
Thanks, everyone.
yeah, and please follow Maggie. And I'm excited I'm always excited to see what she's going to share. So I find myself shaking my head all the time. So
I feel like I do that for a lot of people. Are like, yeah. I get these messages that are like, I've been thinking this. I'm like, yeah, I'm in your head.
right? No, there's a lot of people that will give advice to freelancers and solopreneurs and so forth. But I mean, your advice.
Thank you, Michelle. That means a lot.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much, Maggie. Bye.
Bye.